In the middle of a Montana blizzard, a 7-year-old girl wrapped her arms around a trembling puppy, while her own father drove away and let the snow swallow them whole. Her tiny voice carried through the wind, unheard and fading. But miles away, a Navy SEAL on a lonely mission stopped mid-stride. Something was wrong. Something in that frozen silence was begging to be found. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, subscribe for more tales of courage, sacrifice, and the bonds that refuse to break. Your support truly means the world. Wind scraped across the frozen ridges, carrying the sharp scent of pine and distant storms. Jack Mercer moved steadily through the snow-thickened shadows of Kootenai National Forest, each crunch of his boots disappearing into the vast Montana silence. At 35, the Navy SEAL carried the controlled stillness of a man shaped by survival. Lean, tall, every movement efficient. His face was rugged, marked by a light stubble he never bothered shaving in the field. A faint, narrow scar traced his right jawline, the remnant of shrapnel from a mission long ago. His eyes, storm gray and observant, held the weight of someone who had learned too early that rescue didn't always arrive in time. Strapped across his back was a tactical pack, a survival kit, a compact radio, a thermal blanket, a burner stove, water, compressed food, and a sidearm. Today's mission was simple on paper. Retrieve a downed reconnaissance drone that had gone offline 2 nights earlier somewhere along the foothills near Libby. The job required no team, just endurance, precision, and the ability to survive the cold, all of which Jack possessed in spades. Still, the solitude gnawed at him in ways he tried not to acknowledge. The deeper he walked into the forest, the stronger the memory seeped in, the last time he had trekked these mountains. Operation Cold Ridge. 4 years ago. A blizzard, visibility down to inches, a reconnaissance aircraft missing from radar. He and Bishop, his canine partner, were deployed to locate the crash. Bishop had been a black and tan German shepherd, muscular, disciplined, with sharp ears and a temperament of pure loyalty. More than a working dog, Bishop had been the closest thing Jack had to family, and Bishop had saved his life. Jack still felt the panic in his chest whenever he remembered the moment. The snow shelf collapsing beneath him, the sudden drop, the sickening slide toward the cliff's edge. Bishop had lunged, catching Jack's rucksack strap in his jaws, anchoring him just long enough for Jack to dig in his crampons. But the weight shift had dragged Bishop downward. One heartbeat, one slip, one disappearance. Jack never found him. Not a track. Not a sound, just endless white. The department listed Bishop MIA, presumed dead. Jack carried the loss like a wound that never healed, a quiet emptiness that lived beneath his ribs. He exhaled slowly now, pushing the memory aside. He had a mission to finish. The drone's transponder beeped faintly on his handheld receiver, guiding him deeper into the freezing labyrinth. Yet a different pattern in the snow suddenly caught his eye, something that didn't belong in government coordinates. Jack knelt. Snowflakes clung to the dark brown fabric of his gloves as he brushed the surface aside. A tire track. SUV. Rear right wheel slightly misaligned. Fresh, no more than an hour old. Next to it, large adult boot prints, and beside those, much smaller, a child's footprints. His pulse tightened. Then another set, tiny paws. A puppy, no more than a few months old, judging by the spacing. Jack's training rose instinctively. Civilian presence here was unusual. Children out in a storm like this? Impossible without trouble. He stood, scanning the tree line. The forest answered only with silence. His mission changed instantly. He switched off the drone tracker, turned toward the trail, and moved fast. The tracks staggered after a quarter mile. Child steps, uneven, dragging. Signs of distress. Jack lengthened his stride, weaving through snow-loaded branches. His breath thickened in the icy air as adrenaline sharpened his movements. Then he heard it. A sound barely louder than the wind. A whimper. He broke into a run. Between two lodgepole pines, curled against the base of a fallen tree, sat a small girl, no older than 7. She had long, wavy brown hair tangled with snow, cheeks pale and nearly blue and eyes wide with the glazed confusion of early hypothermia. She wore only a thin pink sweater, far too light for mountain cold. In her trembling arms she clutched a German Shepherd puppy, tiny, maybe 3 months old, with soft sable fur and drooping ears. The puppy was no warmer than the child, its body curled tight, trembling weakly. Jack dropped to his knees. "Hey," he said gently, careful not to startle her. "My name's Jack. I'm here to help." The girl tried to answer, but her lips shook too much to form words. Jack wrapped his arms around both child and pup, assessing them with swift, trained precision. Skin cold, breathing shallow, pupils sluggish. Early stages of hypothermia, dangerous but reversible if he moved fast. He pulled a silver mylar thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it around her shoulders, then reached for the metal flask inside his coat, still warm. "Small sips," he whispered, holding it to her lips. "It'll help." The girl obeyed, trusting him instinctively the way children sometimes trusted good men without question. He pressed the puppy against his chest, sharing body heat, and tucked the blanket tighter around the trio. The girl's eyes fluttered, panic flickering through them. Are we gonna die?" "No," Jack said firmly. "Not today." But his mind moved fast. His temporary SEAL cabin was nearly 9 miles north. Bare essentials. No stove suitable for a child. No milk, no spare blankets, no medical comforts. But 5 miles south. Henry and May Whitaker. Jack had met the elderly couple months earlier on a routine terrain recon. Their cabin was small, hand-built, with walls lined with quilts and shelves of preserves. Henry, white beard, wiry frame, had the calm voice of a man who'd lived 6 decades in the woods. May, soft-spoken, silver-haired, warm brown eyes, always insisted Jack take homemade cornbread whenever he stopped by. They lived simply on Henry's veteran pension and the money May earned selling knitted scarves at the Libby Farmers Market. Jack trusted them. More importantly, he knew they would know exactly how to care for a terrified child and a half-frozen puppy. He wrapped the girl securely in his coat, tucked the puppy inside the blanket, and lifted them both into his arms. "Hold on to me," he murmured. Her tiny fingers clutched his jacket. Jack pressed the child's head to his shoulder, braced against the biting wind, and began the long trek south, toward the Whitaker cabin glowing somewhere in the fading light. Snow had begun to fall in thicker sheets by the time Jack reached the Whitaker cabin, its small windows glowing gold against the dark timber walls. The cabin sat quietly between 2 ancient pines, smoke curling from the chimney, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold world outside. Jack tightened his hold on the girl and the puppy as he approached, feeling the tremor in the child's small body. Henry Whitaker opened the door before Jack could knock. At 64, Henry had the rugged build of a man who'd worked with his hands his entire life. His shoulders were broad, though slightly rounded from years of labor, and his face, lined with deep creases, carried both kindness and fatigue. A neatly trimmed gray beard framed his square jaw, and his blue eyes, though gentle, often appeared as if they were staring through layers of old memories. Tonight, those eyes widened with alarm. "Jack? What on earth?" Henry's voice, gravelly from age and cigarettes he quit 20 years too late, faltered when he saw the child. Behind him, May Whitaker hurried forward. She was 62, small and soft-featured, with silver hair braided over one shoulder and warm brown eyes that had once welcomed library patrons for decades. Her hands, slender, with faint freckles, flew to her mouth. May carried a kind of quiet sorrow that clung to her movements, gentle, careful, as if afraid anything fragile could shatter beneath her touch. "Oh, dear God," she whispered. "Bring them in, Jack. Quickly." Jack stepped inside, and the cabin's heat washed over him. A stone fireplace crackled to the right, casting flickers of amber across the wooden walls. The scent of pine resin and cinnamon hung faintly in the air, a smell May loved to create each winter. Henry closed the door, shutting out the storm. May cleared a space near the fire and laid out a thick quilt she had pieced together from old flannel shirts. "Set her here," she said urgently. Jack knelt and eased the girl down. She whimpered at the loss of his warmth, instinctively clutching the puppy tighter. May knelt beside her, her movements tender but trembling. Henry brought over an armful of blankets. Wool, heavy, well-worn. Jack could see his hands shaking as well. They were both remembering. Jack knew the story. The child May had once carried. A baby they never got to meet. The emergency at Kalispell. The impossible decision forced upon Henry, and the grief that drove them into the quiet exile of this forest. They never spoke of it in detail, but Jack could read the pain in the way Henry looked at the girl now, as if seeing ghosts of the life they lost. May brushed snowy strands from the child's forehead. "Sweetheart, can you hear me? You're safe now. You're warm." Her voice wavered but remained gentle. Jack unpacked a small survival stove, heating water quickly, then mixed an electrolyte blend and coaxed the girl to drink. "Slow sips," he reminded softly. Henry, though, overwhelmed, moved with determination, stoking the fire higher, grabbing towels, searching for an old wool sweater that might fit the child. In his haste, he accidentally dropped a mug which shattered on the floor. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. May touched his arm. "It's all right," she whispered. "She needs us." Jack turned his focus to the puppy whose shivers came in weak waves. The little German shepherd, sable-coated with soft, dark-tipped ears, lifted its head sluggishly. Jack gently ran his fingers down its spine, checking for injuries. The pup licked Jack's thumb once, a faint gesture of trust. "You hang in there, buddy," Jack whispered. As he examined the puppy's neck, his hand brushed something cold. Metal. A collar. Jack froze. He slid his glove off and lifted the small ID tag between his fingers. His breath caught as he read, U.S. Navy K-9, Bishop, status, decommissioned, no active handler on file. The room seemed to tilt. Henry noticed the change in Jack's expression. "What is it?" Jack couldn't speak for a moment. His throat locked. His mind flashed to Bishop, his partner, his shadow through snowstorms, the only one who'd warned him in time during Cold Ridge. The dog who had saved his life and vanished into the white, leaving Jack screaming into a blizzard that swallowed every sound. May leaned forward, concern tightening her brows. "Jack?" He finally found his voice, but it came out rough. "This tag. It belongs to my K-9, Bishop. They said he died 4 years ago." May looked stunned. Henry's mouth tightened. The child, half asleep in her cocoon of blankets, clutched the puppy closer. Jack stared at the tag as if it were a piece of Bishop himself brought back from the dead. His heart pounded, memories pushing up from places he had buried for years. Bishop dragging him from the cliff. Bishop's bark drowning in the roar of snow. The crushing silence after. "Why?" Jack whispered. "Is this puppy wearing his collar?" No one answered. The only sound was the crackle of the fire, the soft whimper of the puppy, and the distant wind howling against the cabin walls. Jack's mind raced. If this collar survived, then Bishop might have survived too. Or someone else found him, someone who removed his tag, someone who passed it on, a message, a trail, a coincidence too heavy to believe? Henry placed a steady hand on Jack's shoulder. "Son, whatever this means, we'll figure it out. But right now, that little one needs you." Jack nodded stiffly, forcing himself back to the present. Together, the 3 adults warmed the girl, changed her into dry clothes May found, and wrapped her in quilts Henry insisted were the warmest in Montana, even though one corner was patched in a slightly crooked square that May teased him about. Despite the fear and the unknown, the cabin filled slowly with a fragile hope. After an hour, the child's breathing steadied color, returned to her cheeks. She murmured a soft thank you, voice tiny but alive. Jack sat back, exhaustion and relief mixing in his chest. But his gaze drifted once more to the silver tag glinting beside the pup's fur. Bishop. The name hit like a heartbeat. Something was waiting for him beyond this mystery. Something tied to a past he thought was buried in snow, and Jack Mercer knew one thing. He would find the truth. The storm eased into a soft, steady fall by morning, the forest muted beneath layers of fresh snow. Inside the Whitaker cabin, the fire glowed gently, its warmth spreading into every wooden corner. Jack sat near the hearth with a steaming cup of coffee, his expression calm but alert. The girl had slept curled beside the puppy all night, the two rising and falling with the same rhythm, like a single fragile heartbeat. When she stirred, her lashes trembled before her brown eyes fluttered open. She blinked at the cabin's ceiling, confused at first, then visibly relieved when she spotted Copper, curled against her ribs. The puppy wagged its tail weakly, nudging her cheek with a cold nose. May, already awake and preparing oatmeal on the stove, smiled softly. "Good morning, sweetheart. You're safe here." The child hesitated, her small fingers gripping the edge of the quilt before she whispered, Where are we?" Jack moved closer, his voice gentle. "My name is Jack. I found you in the forest last night. This is Henry and May. They helped us bring you back from the cold." Lily studied him. His calm gray eyes, the quiet steadiness in his posture, the sense of safety he carried without trying. Something inside her loosened. She sat up slowly. "My name is Lily. Lily Carter." Jack nodded. "Lily, can you tell us where you're from?" She tugged at her sleeve, nervous. "Bozeman. I live with my dad." Jack exchanged a quick glance with Henry, who leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His weathered face softened. "Do you have a mom, Lily?" he asked gently. Lily looked down. She died 2 years ago." The room fell quiet except for the soft bubbling from the pot on the stove. Jack spoke carefully. "What was her name?" "Rachel Carter," Lily whispered. "She was important. People said she was the smartest woman in Montana." As she spoke, the memories unraveled like threads she had been holding tightly for too long. Rachel Carter, tall, elegant, with straight dark hair always tied neatly during work, had been the CEO of Aurora Ridge Technologies, a Denver-based medical device company revolutionizing home diagnostic systems. Reporters called her a visionary. Doctors praised her brilliance. Employees respected her fairness and discipline. To Lily, she had been simply Mom, the woman who read bedtime stories in a soft voice and kept Lily's drawings pinned above her office desk. When Rachel died in a crash on I-90, heavy fog, a sudden skid, the official report said, Lily remembered only the cold church, the smell of lilies, and how her father wouldn't look at her. Mark Carter had once been a handsome man, tall with a square jaw and neatly combed sandy hair, but life beside a brilliant wife had deepened the bitterness in his features. Years of insecurity carved permanent shadows under his eyes. He drank too much, spoke too loudly, hid his resentment behind jokes that weren't funny. And, after Rachel died, he became someone else entirely, angrier, heavier, and crueler in ways Lily never understood. Mark later married Vanessa Cole, a woman in her mid-30s with platinum blonde hair, slim frame, and a polished smile. Vanessa had once been the PR director at Aurora Ridge, known for her strategic charm and perfect presentation. Social media loved her curated life, fitness routines, lifestyle tips, faux inspirational quotes. In private, however, she treated Lily like a stain on her perfect Instagram aesthetic. Lily looked up now, tears threatening. "Dad, he doesn't like noise. He says I'm too much. Vanessa says I'm dramatic." May settled beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "No child is too much. Not ever." Lily swallowed hard. "I don't know why they hate me." Henry closed his eyes briefly, the ache in his chest familiar. Too familiar. Jack leaned forward. "Lily, what were you doing in the forest yesterday?" Her breathing hitched. Copper whimpered as if sensing her fear. "Dad said Copper needed a checkup," she whispered. "At the rescue center in Kalispell. I went with him because Copper gets scared without me." "And then?" Jack asked, voice steady. Lily twisted her small fingers together. "We didn't go to Kalispell. We went the wrong way. Into the mountains. Dad drove down a dirt road. He told me to get out. Said the puppy needed to stretch." Henry's jaw clenched. Lily's lips trembled. "Then he pushed me, and he threw snow at us, and he got back in the car and left." May covered her mouth. Jack remained still, but his breath grew tighter. "I tried to follow the tire tracks," Lily said, tears finally spilling. "But the snow kept coming, and I couldn't find the road again." Copper crawled into her lap, licking her hand as she cried quietly. Jack let her have a moment before asking gently, "Lily, how did you meet Copper? You said something about a rescue center." She nodded, wiping her face. "Northern Lights Canine Rescue Center. Miss Evelyn runs it. She's old, but pretty. She smells like peppermint. She has gray curly hair and round glasses. She always talks to the dogs like they're people." Jack pictured someone in her late 60s. Short, sturdy frame, expressive face. The type of woman who had probably spent her whole life caring for animals and refusing to retire. "She told me," Lily continued, "that Copper's mom was a special dog. A hero dog. She said the collar used to belong to Copper's mom, and she hoped Copper would be as brave." Jack's heart gave a painful, sharp jolt. A hero dog. A working canine. A collar with Bishop's name. Copper shifted, the tag glinting under the firelight like a whisper from the past. Jack steadied his voice. "Did Miss Evelyn say anything else?" "She said Copper's mom was found in the woods a long time ago, hurt, tired. Someone saved her and brought her to the center. They didn't know who her handler was." Henry frowned. "They didn't check the military?" Lily shook her head. "Miss Evelyn said nobody left a number, and the tag didn't have anyone's name, just the dog's." Jack absorbed this slowly, his pulse drumming. Bishop had been declared missing. Perhaps the paperwork had been muddled. Perhaps no one had known where to send updates. The military sometimes lost trails, not often, but enough that good dogs fell through cracks. Lily clutched Copper tighter. "Miss Evelyn said Copper could protect me." "She was right," May murmured. Silence fell, heavy but full. Finally, Lily whispered, "Am I in trouble?" May pulled her close. "No, my dear. You're loved here." Jack looked at Henry, then May, then Lily. He felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like another layer of snow. "I'm going to find out the truth, Lily," he said. "About your mom, about what happened to you, and about Copper's family." His eyes hardened. "Your father won't get near you again." Lily nodded slowly, clinging to Copper as if the puppy were the last warm thing in the world. Henry cleared his throat. "Jack." "She can stay here as long as she needs." May nodded firmly. "We'll take care of her, both of them." And just like that, the Whitaker cabin, once a place of sorrow, filled with the soft beginnings of hope. Henry built a small wooden bed for Lily that afternoon, sanding the edges until they were smooth. May found a box of old crayons and picture books from her years at the library. Lily fed the chickens with Henry, giggling when one hopped too close. Copper followed her everywhere, clumsy paws sliding on the wooden floor. By evening, it was impossible to tell which hearts were healing which. But Jack knew his path now. Tomorrow, he would begin the investigation, and it would start at Northern Lights Canine Rescue Center. The next morning broke pale and quiet, the kind of cold that silvered the windows and made every breath feel weighted. Jack stood outside the Whitaker cabin long before sunrise, Bishop's old tag glinting between his fingers, Copper pawing lightly at his boot as if sensing what was coming. Inside, Lily slept safely under May's quilts, her small frame rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. For the first time since Jack found her, there was no fear in her breathing. He tucked the tag into his jacket, whispered a quiet promise to return, and drove south toward Kalispell. The Northern Lights. Canine Rescue Center sat at the edge of the forest, an old ranch property converted into kennels and training yards, with snow-covered roofs and a long gravel driveway lined with worn wooden fencing. Dozens of barks echoed through the crisp air, some eager, some anxious, some simply announcing the arrival of a stranger. Jack stepped out of the truck and scanned the property. The buildings were modest but well kept. A main office with a green metal roof, 2 long kennel barns, and an outdoor play yard enclosed by chain link. The winter sun cast faint glimmers on the snow. The office door opened, and Evelyn Hart stepped out. She was a woman in her late 60s, small but sturdy, with round glasses perched on a soft, expressive face. Her gray, curly hair escaped its bun in wisps, giving her an air of perpetual motion. She wore a faded maroon parka dusted with dog fur. Lines around her eyes spoke of a life spent worrying about things without voices. "You must be Jack Mercer," she said, her tone warm but cautious, as if she already sensed this visit wasn't routine. Jack introduced himself, and Evelyn shook his hand with surprising strength. "Lily's a sweet child. When I heard what happened, God help her." She exhaled sharply, then straightened. "You said you needed to talk to me about copper?" Jack took the small ID tag from his pocket and held it out. Evelyn's expression changed instantly. Her eyes widened as she reached for it carefully, as though handling an artifact meant to be treasured. "Oh," she whispered. "Bishop." The name hit Jack like a physical blow. "You recognize it," he said quietly. "Of course I do," Evelyn replied, voice trembling slightly. "I've kept this tag for years." She motioned for Jack to follow her into the office. The interior was warm, filled with the scent of coffee and the faint tang of disinfectant. Photos lined the walls, rescued dogs, adopted families, and volunteers laughing in the Montana summer sun. Evelyn sat behind her wooden desk, worn smooth from decades of use. 3 weeks after that massive blizzard in the Cold Ridge region, must have been early 2022, our local ranger found a shepherd wandering near one of the abandoned summer campgrounds, she began. Male, underweight, limping on his right hind leg. Shy, but not aggressive. Jack clenched his jaw, imagining Bishop alone, searching, surviving. "They brought him here," she continued. "He refused food at first, barely let anyone touch him except me. When we scanned for a microchip, the screen flashed, U.S. Navy K-9, Bishop, status decommissioned, while no active handler on file." Jack leaned forward. "Decommissioned?" "Yes," Evelyn nodded. "The dog was no longer listed as active duty. The handler slot was blank, so I called the Department of Defense line for working animals." She folded her hands. "They told me Bishop had been recorded missing in action. Mission file closed. Said that if we had physical custody and no active handler in the system, the dog was legally adoptable." Jack stared at her. "They didn't contact me." "I assumed they had," Evelyn said softly. "When no one came forward, I kept Bishop here, and he became part of this place." Her voice softened with affection. "He didn't trust men much. Something in his past frightened him deeply, but he was gentle with women, incredibly patient with children. Our silent guardian, we called him." Jack swallowed hard. That was Bishop, fierce in danger, tender in peace. 3 years ago, he fathered a litter," Evelyn went on. "Copper is from that litter. When Lily adopted him 2 months ago, well, she bonded with him instantly. And she reminded me of Bishop, gentle, earnest. So I took the old tag and passed it on." Jack nodded slowly, understanding the intention behind the gesture, even if the consequences led to unexpected revelations. He drew a breath. "Where is Bishop now?" Evelyn stood. "Come with me." They crossed the yard to Barn 2, the crisp air filled with the sounds of eager paws and rhythmic barking. When Evelyn opened the door, warm air and dog scents washed over them. The kennels were clean, each with blankets and toys. At the far end, a large shepherd with thick black and tan fur lay curled on a bed of straw. His right hind leg bore a faint old scar, and he rested his weight unevenly. The dog raised his head at the sound of footsteps. Jack stopped walking. Bishop tilted his head, ears forward. Recognition sparked. Slowly at first, Bishop rose, then broke into a limping run, tail beating urgently as he reached the gate. Jack's voice cracked. "Bishop, heel." The dog froze instantly, sitting with perfect military posture, eyes locked on his handler with a trembling intensity. Evelyn unlatched the kennel. Bishop launched forward and pressed himself against Jack's legs, whining, trembling, burying his face into Jack's coat as though trying to crawl fully into his arms. Jack knelt, arms around the dog, forehead against Bishop's. "I looked for you," he whispered. "I looked everywhere." Bishop answered with small, choked sounds that were neither growls nor cries, but something between reunion and relief. Jack tested another command softly. "Stay." Bishop obeyed. "Down." Bishop dropped instantly. "Watch." The dog's eyes sharpened into focus. Jack wiped his eyes before they could fall. "You remember everything." "He never forgot," Evelyn said warmly. Jack stood and drew a steady breath. "I want to take him home. I'll handle everything legally, but Bishop belongs with me." Evelyn nodded immediately. "I'll prepare the transfer papers. He's retired, of course, no active service responsibilities, just a loyal companion for a SEAL who clearly needs him." Before Jack left, he contacted Carla Ruiz, an FBI agent he trusted in Helena. Carla, mid-30s, Latina, sharp jawline, sharp mind, had short black hair and a reputation for being relentless in financial crimes. Her voice always carried steel. Carla listened as Jack explained Lily's story, Copper's collar, and the strange pattern of events around Rachel Carter's death and Lily's abandonment. "Send me everything," she said. "I'll run background checks on Mark, Vanessa, and Aurora Ridge." 2 hours later, she called back. "Jack, listen carefully," Carla said. "Rachel Carter created a trust for Lily worth around $80 million. Stocks, patents, shares, assets. Mark is only the administrator until Lily turns 18. "And if Lily dies before then?" Jack asked, already dreading the answer. "Then the trust reverts to the surviving parent," Carla replied grimly. "Meaning Mark. Vanessa gains access through marriage." Jack closed his eyes. "So, the motive is real," he said. "Very real." "Jack," Carla added, "keep the girl hidden. This won't end quietly." He ended the call, looked down at Bishop, tail sweeping, eyes steady, and felt something in him shift. He wasn't just rescuing a child anymore. He was walking into a war. By the time Jack and Bishop reached the outskirts of Bozeman, the mountains were just dark shapes against a sky washed in deep indigo. Suburban lights glowed softly below, scattered like a small constellation at the edge of the wilderness. Jack parked 2 streets away from the Carter house, cutting the engine and sitting in silence for a moment, watching his breath fog in the cab. Bishop sat upright in the passenger seat, ears pricked, his gaze sharp and waiting. The years had etched a little stiffness into his movements, but not into his focus. In the dim cabin light, his amber eyes looked almost human. "Just like old times," Jack murmured. "Only this time, we're not on anyone's payroll." Bishop huffed softly, as if in agreement. The Carter property sat on a larger lot at the edge of a modern subdivision. Sleek lines, big windows, clean stonework. The kind of house built for magazine spreads and curated holiday photos. Soft outdoor lighting washed the front walk, and small evergreen trees lined the driveway. A discreet row of cameras blinked along the eaves, watching the snow-dusted lawn. From the street, the place looked perfect. Jack knew better than to trust what looked perfect. He slipped around the back with Bishop at his heel, moving between shadows, every step placed with quiet precision. Up close, the security layout revealed itself. Motion sensors at the corners, small domes for cameras tracking the yard, a digital keypad by the back door. He unclipped a compact device from his belt, a signal jammer roughly the size of his palm, matte, black, and unremarkable. He powered it on. A faint buzz tickled the air, almost imperceptible, as its small antennae began to disrupt the Wi-Fi and external camera feed in a narrow radius. "You've got 15 minutes before someone's system logs an error they actually read," he told himself. "Move." The back door was glass and steel, with a keypad set into the frame. Jack slid on thin tactical gloves and stared at the keys. Lily's soft voice from the cabin replayed in his head. "Mom used my birthday for everything. Her phone code, the gate, the garage, the kitchen tablet. She said she'd never forget me that way." He tapped in the sequence, month, day, year of Lily's birth. The lock gave a soft click. Inside, the house was all clean angles and expensive taste. Gray hardwood floors, white walls, art chosen to impress. No toys, no stray socks, no marks of a child's life, just curated absence. Bishop moved ahead in a low sweep, nose close to the ground, moving room to room with silent efficiency. Jack waited at the hallway intersection, listening. No creak of floorboards, no TV murmur, no plumbing sounds. Empty. Bishop returned after a minute, ears relaxed, posture calm. No threat. "Good," Jack whispered. "Let's go to the snake's den." Mark Carter's office sat at the far end of the hallway, behind a heavy wooden door with a frosted glass panel. Lily had described it in detail. The room she wasn't allowed to enter, the one where the door always felt like it held the air in. Jack opened it carefully. Inside, the office was exactly what he expected from a man obsessed with appearances. Dark wooden desk, leather chair, a wall of shelves with law and finance books that looked barely touched. Family photos arranged like props. In one, Rachel stood with Lily on her hip, both smiling genuinely. In another, more recent, Vanessa posed beside Mark, their smiles slightly too polished, their eyes not quite as warm as the camera begged them to be. On the far wall stood a large wooden cabinet, tall and heavy, its doors closed. Lily's forbidden piece of furniture. Jack moved to it, fingers trailing lightly along the worn edge. The handles showed more oil and wear than the surrounding wood. He opened the doors. Behind neatly stacked binders and a row of organized folders, he found what he expected, a rectangular outline in the drywall. A wall safe, digital keypad flush with the surface. He'd seen enough of these in other countries, under darker skies. He set his pack on the floor and pulled out a small kit, a flashlight with a narrow beam, a tiny bottle of fine gray powder, clear tape, a soft brush, and a compact contact microphone with a wired earpiece. He angled the flashlight across the keypad. 3 of the digits, 2, 0, and 8, showed slightly more wear. He dusted the pad with powder, then gently pressed tape against the surface, lifting faint, overlapping prints. 4 keys came back with discernible patterns, 0, 2, 7, 9. 4 numbers, he murmured, multiple combos. Lily had told him about dates her father cared about. Their wedding anniversary, the year Aurora Ridge was founded. Rachel's birthday, Lily's own birth date. All combinations of those digits. Jack plugged the contact microphone's pad against the safe door near the locking mechanism and slipped the earpiece in. Inside the safe, each correct press, each shifting tumbler, would speak to him in tiny clicks and muted movements. He began to test combinations, always with patience, always listening. 20, 07, 92, 29, 07, 20. Random, mechanical rejection. No subtle easing of internal parts. He exhaled slowly, keeping his heartbeat steady. Panic made hands clumsy. Calm made them precise. He tried another cluster based on Lily's birth year and Aurora Ridge's founding year, shifting orders. His gloved fingertip hovered, listening. 2907. On the last press, he heard it, a softer, more intimate sound in his ear, like a breath catching. The internal bolts shifted, not open yet, but close. Almost, he whispered. He adjusted the sequence, feeling for that same internal pause. 7902. Click. Stronger, heavier. He reversed the middle digits. 7092. The safe gave a deep, satisfying thunk. The lock disengaged. Jack opened the door. Inside, the darkness held no gold, no stacks of cash, just paper, which, in the modern world, was more dangerous than any weapon. On top lay a thick envelope labeled in neat legal script, Last Will and Testament, Rachel Carter. Jack opened it carefully and scanned the content with the speed of someone used to reading under fire. The language confirmed everything Carla had hinted at. A trust of approximately $80 million, combining Rachel's stock in Aurora Ridge, liquid savings, intellectual property rights, and real estate, designated solely for Lily. Mark, named only as trustee, explicitly barred from converting the assets to personal property. If the beneficiary, Lily Carter, died before attaining 18 years of age, the majority of the trust assets would revert to the surviving legal guardian, Mark Carter. Jack's jaw tightened. The ink might as well have been written in blood. Beneath the will, he found bank statements and transfer authorizations. Money wired slowly, carefully, from smaller accounts into a shell corporation registered in Wyoming under Vanessa's name, a bland company title, generic enough to draw no attention. Signatures from Mark and Vanessa. Each movement small enough to hide under regular financial noise, but collectively pointing to a quiet theft. Deeper still lay printed email chains between Vanessa and a Denver attorney whose tone, even on paper, dripped with polite corruption. Phrases like asset protection strategy and repositioning funds ahead of any contested guardianship repeated in different forms. One folder contained a draft psychological report, incomplete but chilling, a private psychiatrist's letterhead at the top with the language framing Lily as emotionally volatile, prone to fantasy narratives, and difficulty distinguishing reality from imagination. Preparing the groundwork to discredit her, to say the girl who survived the snow was just making it up. At the very back, half crumpled, lay a yellow notepad page with Mark's messy handwriting. North Ridge, old service road, no traffic, no cameras, just one wrong turn. Snow does the rest. Jack stared at the words until the room narrowed to a tunnel around them. He took photos of everything with his phone, page by page, document by document. Then he slid the original will into a protective sleeve and tucked it into his jacket. The rest, transfers, emails, the draft report, the note, he returned to the safe exactly as he found them. He closed the door, relocked the safe with the same code, and carefully cleaned the keypad of new prints. On the way out, he accessed Mark's computer, quickly inserting a secure drive and copying key folders, financial archives, email backups, shared drives with Vanessa. Years of greed condensed into data. Then, as quietly as he had arrived, he and Bishop slipped back into the winter air. The jammer flicked off. The cameras hummed back to life, none the wiser. By the time Jack returned to the Whitaker cabin, night had wrapped itself fully, around the trees. Through the kitchen window, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time, a small, fragile picture of normalcy. Lily stood on a chair by the counter, sleeves rolled up, cheeks dusted with flour. May guided her hands as they shaped dough into small loaves. Copper balanced on his hind legs trying to see what the fuss was about. Henry stood by the door, checking the line of simple snares he set around the property, not to catch but to teach Lily how to spot them and leave them empty, because she hated the thought of animals trapped and afraid. On the porch, Bishop watched, lying like a sentinel, tail thumping lazily every time Lily laughed. Jack stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The warmth hit him along with the smell of bread, wood smoke, and something like home. After dinner, once the dishes were washed and Lily had changed into one of May's oversized sweaters, they gathered around the fire. Copper sprawled across Lily's lap. Bishop lay at Jack's feet, eyes half closed but listening. Jack spoke gently but firmly. "Lily, I need to ask you some hard questions about that day. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to, but your answers can help keep you safe." She nodded, small hands stroking Copper's ears. Okay. He walked her through everything step by step, where Mark said they were going, the exact road he turned onto, the last words he spoke before getting back in the SUV. Whether he smiled, whether he looked afraid, whether he looked relieved. Lily answered slowly, honestly. Sometimes she had to pause and breathe when her voice shook. May sat beside her, hand on her shoulder, steady as a lighthouse. Henry listened with his fists clenched on his knees, fury simmering beneath grief. Jack wrote everything down, date and time stamped, Lily's words as close to exact as he could make them. Then he had Henry and May describe in their own words how Jack carried Lily in from the storm, her condition, her temperature, her confusion, the way she clung to Copper like her life depended on it. He scanned the written statements, added the images of the will, the bank documents, the fake report, and Mark's note. Then he encrypted every file and sent them to Carla Ruiz with a single message. "Here's your case." The reply came 15 minutes later. Carla's text was brief, but every word carried weight. "Jack, this is more than enough. We can indict Mark and Vanessa on multiple counts: attempted homicide, fraud, conspiracy. I'll move fast. Keep Lily hidden. It's about to get loud." Jack locked his phone and looked at the small circle around the fire. The storm, he knew, was finally coming for the right people. Winter sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps in Gallatin County, turning the lingering frost into a pale shimmer. The cold was sharp, but not as sharp as the tension gathering inside Courtroom 3. People shuffled into wooden benches, reporters whispered behind raised phones, and the faint smell of old varnish clung to the air like a memory that refused to fade. At the front of the room, Lily sat between Henry and May Whitaker. Her hair, brushed smooth by May that morning, fell in soft brown waves against her navy sweater. She looked small in the heavy wooden chair, but her spine was straight, her chin just slightly lifted with a bravery no 7-year-old should ever have to learn. Henry sat on her right, wearing his one good flannel shirt tucked neatly into worn trousers. He looked older today, not because of age, but because of the weight he carried, the fear of failing a child again. May sat on Lily's left, warm brown eyes constantly checking on her, her hand a soft anchor on top of Lily's. Behind them, Jack and Bishop stood like silent guardians. Jack wore his duty jacket, hair trimmed, face calm but unreadable. Bishop sat obediently at his heel, thick coat groomed, amber eyes sharp and scanning. The dog seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, motionless, yet ready to move the instant Lily needed him. The courtroom murmuring dropped into silence when the door opened and the defendants were let in. Mark Carter entered first. Tall, once handsome, now worn by stress. His sandy hair, usually slicked back with careful vanity, hung in disheveled strands. Despite the shackles and the orange jumpsuit, he tried to arrange his face into something arrogant, but it faltered. His blue eyes flicked toward Lily, then away when she flinched. His jaw worked, as if he were chewing through excuses. Vanessa Cole followed, a woman in her mid-30s with sculpted features, perfectly shaped brows, and platinum blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. Even in her jumpsuit, she carried herself like a lifestyle influencer posing for an audience. Her mascara was smudged from tears, but her eyes still darted toward the press as if begging them to remember her best angles. They were seated, wrists chained, expressions brittle. The judge, Harold Winslow, entered shortly after, a man in his late 50s with a strong nose, steel-gray eyebrows, and a voice that carried authority born not from ego, but from decades of handling humanity at its worst. His presence quieted the last whispers. Court is now in session. The prosecution began with a concise summary of charges. Attempted first-degree murder of a minor. Child endangerment causing severe risk of bodily harm. Conspiracy to commit homicide. Fraud and embezzlement of trust assets. Tampering with estate documents. The evidence unfolded like a terrible tapestry. The original will Rachel Carter had signed. Bank statements showing transfers into a Wyoming shell company, under Vanessa's name. email chains discussing asset repositioning, a fabricated psychological report painting Lily as unstable, Mark's handwritten note, a chilling blueprint of the plan to abandon Lily in the forest, and Lily's testimony, small, trembling but devastating in its honesty. Lily spoke only a few sentences, each one carefully prompted by the prosecutor. He said Copper needed a checkup. He drove us into the woods. He pushed me out and told me to walk. He never came back. Her voice never rose above a whisper, but the courtroom shook with every word. May wrapped an arm around her. Henry's eyes glistened. Jack felt his jaw tighten until it hurt. Bishop leaned forward, resting his chin gently against Lily's calf. The girl's trembling stopped. When called to the stand, Jack delivered his testimony with military clarity. His voice remained steady as he recounted finding Lily, seeing her condition, retrieving evidence from the Carter residence, and contacting the FBI. He did not embellish. He did not need to. Facts, spoken plainly, could cut deeper than anger. Henry and May testified next. Simple, sincere accounts of the night Jack carried Lily into their cabin. Her lips blue, her fingers curled tight around Copper as though clinging to life itself. The elderly couple spoke with trembling conviction, their voices woven with the grief of losing a child long ago and the fierce love that had returned unexpectedly to their home. Mark flushed red, then pale, then red again as each piece of evidence struck him like a blow he couldn't block. Still, he refused contrition. When given the chance to speak, he lifted his chin and said, "My daughter always exaggerated things. She made us miserable for years. If anything, I should be thanked for trying to maintain order." A wave of disgust rolled through the courtroom. Vanessa cried, but her gaze remained fixed on the cameras as though she were auditioning for sympathy rather than facing justice. She offered apologies, but none of them carried weight. They dissolved into the stale air before reaching anyone's heart. Judge Winslow listened, unmoved. When the verdicts were delivered, the room held its breath. Mark Carter, guilty on all counts, sentenced to 30 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 20. Vanessa Cole, guilty of conspiracy, fraud, and participation in the abandonment plan, sentenced to 18 years, plus supervised release. As the deputies led Mark away, he turned his head sharply, searching for Lily. But Lily pressed her face into May's shoulder and didn't look. Some ties weren't worth holding on to. After the sentencing, Lily's attorney, a calm, sharp man named Daniel Brooks, early 40s, dark hair streaked with gray, gentle demeanor despite years of courtroom battles, presented a petition. Henry and May Whitaker should become Lily's legal guardians. The judge looked at the old couple, then at Lily, whose small hand tightened around May's fingers. "Do you want this, Lily?" Judge Winslow asked. The little girl swallowed, then nodded. "They chose me," she said softly. "They love me because of me, not because of money." May's tears fell freely. Henry's lower lip quivered. Even Jack felt a tightness in his chest he didn't bother to hide. Judge Winslow smiled faintly. "Then I grant the petition. Lily Carter will remain the sole beneficiary of her trust. The estate will be managed by an independent financial company, and Henry and May Whitaker shall be her legal guardians until adulthood." The gavel fell. The old wounds of 3 different lives, Lily's, Henry's, May's, began to close at last. In the months that followed, healing took shape in small, beautiful steps. With guidance from counselors and financial advisors, Lily chose to use part of her inheritance to build a community center in Bozeman, Rachel's Haven, named for the mother she still loved fiercely. It became a place for children like her, orphans, survivors of abuse, kids in need of safety. Northern Lights partnered to bring rescue dogs every week for therapy sessions. Copper became the center's unofficial mascot, trotting from child to child with joyful purpose. Jack returned to duty, Bishop at his side once more. The bond they'd rekindled sharpened their teamwork. Bishop's nose located the fallen drone in a narrow crevasse between two ridges within hours. Mission completed. And yet, every break he got, every weekend, every holiday, Jack found himself steering his old truck down the familiar dirt road toward the Whitaker cabin. Bishop stuck his head out the passenger window, ears flapping, nose filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke. At the end of the road, Henry always stood splitting logs, waving as Jack parked. May would appear on the porch, apron dusted with flour, calling them in for stew. Lily, now brighter, sturdier, ran down the steps, Copper bounding beside her, his ears too big for his head. They always greeted Jack the same way, as if he was not just a visitor, but someone returning home. And in the quiet Montana wilderness, a former SEAL, a once-lost K-9, a girl who survived abandonment, and two souls who thought parenting was forever beyond their reach slowly stitched a new family together, one built not by blood but by choice, healing, and the quiet promise of better days. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels in the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, in the shape of a frightened little girl saved from the snow, in the faithfulness of a dog who never stopped searching for his handler, in an old couple finally given the second chance they prayed for, and in a soldier who followed a whisper in the wind when no one else heard it. In moments of darkness, when betrayal cuts deepest and hope feels too thin to hold, God often moves through ordinary people, guiding their steps, softening their hearts, and bringing them together in ways no one could plan. Jack, Lily, Bishop, Henry, May. Their lives intertwined not by accident, but by a quiet grace that turned suffering into healing, and strangers into family. And perhaps that is the message waiting for each of us today. Even in the coldest seasons of our lives, God may already be sending the help we need. Sometimes through a miracle, sometimes through a person, sometimes through a path we never expected. If this story touched your heart, please help it travel further. Share it so someone who feels lost in the snow tonight might find warmth again. Leave a comment to remind others they're not alone. And if you'd like to join our growing family of stories filled with courage, faith, and kindness, please subscribe to the channel. May God bless you, watch over your family, and place His hand gently on anyone walking through their own storm today. Amen.